I never thought I'd see a wild lynx look at me that way, as if it were begging. It wasn't some fantasy or one of those viral moments people fake for the internet. It was real, and that look changed everything. That morning started like any other. The rain had just stopped after 2 straight days, and the forest still smelled like wet pine and mud. I was driving my old silver pickup down the service road that led to the northern trailhead. My name's Ryan, and I work part-time as a volunteer guide for the park rangers, checking for washed-out trails and downed trees after storms. Nothing heroic, just something to stay close to the woods. The road turned to soft clay about 3 miles in. I slowed down, rolled the window halfway, and heard it, a sound I couldn't quite place. Not the cry of a bird or the bark of a deer. It was low and desperate, half growl, half whimper. I killed the engine and listened. The sound came again, muffled, from the right side of the road where the ground dipped toward the swamp. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the muck. The air was thick and still. I moved carefully, following the sound until I saw it. A pair of pale blue eyes staring at me from a pit of mud. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. A lynx, almost completely submerged, its fur plastered to its head, whiskers caked in brown sludge. Only its head and part of its shoulders were above the surface. The animal wasn't fighting anymore, just breathing in shallow, terrified gasps. Instinct told me to back away. This was a wild predator. But then the lynx looked right at me. Not with rage, not with fear, just something that felt human. I can't explain it any other way. I said quietly, "You got yourself in deep trouble, didn't you?" The ears flicked once, and she let out a faint moan. I scanned the area, the mud stretched wide, with no solid footing close enough. I went back to the truck for a rope and 2 old boards I kept for crossing streams. When I returned, the lynx was still there, her head barely above the surface now. Her breathing quickened when she saw me, but she didn't struggle. I tested the first step with 1 board. My boots sank halfway in. The suction was immediate, thick and cold around my ankles. I laid the second board forward, spreading my weight, moving inch by inch. The rope looped over my shoulder. When I was close enough, I crouched, talking softly so she'd stay calm. "Easy now, just hold still." My voice shook. I could feel the mud pulling harder each time I moved. The rope brushed against her fur, and she flinched, but didn't bite. I slid the loop under her chest, praying she wouldn't panic. She trembled, growled softly, but let me do it. I pulled once to tighten it. The mud sucked her down another inch. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear anything else. Back on solid ground, I wrapped the rope around a tree trunk and pulled. Nothing. The rope went taut. My boots slipped. I leaned all my weight, gritting my teeth. "Come on, girl, fight with me." For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a sickening slurp, the mud loosened its grip. The lynx's shoulders came free, then her body. I fell backward into the wet grass, the rope burning my hands. She lay there, covered in mud, gasping, sides heaving. I stayed low, ready to run if she lunged. But she didn't. Instead, she blinked, turned her head toward me, and made a weak sound. Not a growl, not a hiss. More like a sigh. I couldn't move. We just stared at each other, 2 living things trying to understand what had just happened. After a minute, she pushed herself up. Her back leg trembled, maybe sprained, but she stayed upright. I expected her to bolt into the woods. Instead, she limped a few steps, stopped, looked back at me, and made that same quiet sound again. Then she started walking, slow and uneven, toward the darker part of the swamp. I wiped the mud off my face and muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." She stopped again, turned, and waited. My boots squelched in the mud as I followed her with heavy breaths. I didn't know why. Maybe I just needed to know where she was going. Or maybe I already sensed this wasn't over yet. The lynx limped ahead, leaving a crooked trail of paw prints through the wet soil. She moved with determination, pausing every few steps to look back at me. The sky had darkened again. The smell of rain hung heavy in the air. My boots squished with every step, but I couldn't stop following. There was something in the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, not fear, but purpose. After about 10 minutes, she stopped at the edge of another stretch of swamp. The water there was darker, the surface broken with patches of reeds. The lynx crouched low, her tail twitching nervously, and made a sound that cut through the drizzle, a sharp, trembling yowl. Then she did it again, louder this time. My stomach turned cold. I stepped closer, scanning the mud. At first I saw nothing. Then the surface rippled, a faint movement, a twitch of fur just under the muck. My heart sank. It wasn't debris. It was another lynx, smaller, barely moving. A cub. Its head was half submerged, eyes closed, body limp. I froze, realizing that if not for her, I'd have walked right past. She circled the spot anxiously, her paws sinking deeper. I could see she wanted to jump in, but exhaustion and the slick mud held her back. She let out a soft, guttural sound that I'll never forget, the sound of a mother losing her grip on hope. I dropped my backpack and went down to my knees. This part of the swamp was worse, wetter, looser, the kind that swallowed you fast. I stretched one of the boards forward again, testing the edge, then tied the rope around my waist this time. The cub barely stirred when I reached out with a stick. Mud oozed over my glove. I cursed under my breath. The rain started to fall harder, pelting the back of my neck. I had to go in deeper. The cold hit like knives when the mud reached my thighs. Each movement pulled at my legs like invisible hands. I inched closer, heart pounding. Come on, little one, stay with me. I managed to hook the rope under its belly, praying it wouldn't snap from the weight. When I pulled, the cub's paw twitched, a flicker of life. That was enough. I hauled it out inch by inch, every pull tearing at my muscles. Mud bubbled and hissed like something alive. When the cub finally came free, I fell backward, gasping. The mother lynx darted forward, stopping a few feet away, eyes wide, body trembling. She didn't attack. She just stood there, panting, watching every move. I wiped the mud from the cub's face. Its chest moved shallowly, but it was breathing. I wrapped it in my jacket, speaking softly even though I knew they didn't understand words. We're getting out of here, both of you. Back at the truck, I opened the metal crate I used for dogs. The mother hesitated at first, pacing in the rain. Then, as if realizing I wasn't taking her baby away, she climbed in after it. She curled around the cub, eyes never leaving me. The sight hit me harder than I expected. Wild trust, fragile and dangerous. I slammed the tailgate shut, climbed into the driver's seat, and started the engine. My hands were shaking. I called Mark, a park ranger I'd worked with before. The line cracked with static. Mark, it's Ryan. I've got 2 lynxes here, one adult, one cub. Both half dead. I need a rehab contact. Jesus, Ryan. You're not supposed to move wildlife yourself, he said, his voice tense. You could have been torn apart. They weren't exactly in a position to tear anyone apart, I said. Just give me the number. After a pause, he sighed. There's a small wildlife center off Route 18. Ask for Dr. Collins. Tell her I sent you. By the time I reached the center, dusk had fallen. The rain turned to mist, glowing in the headlights. A woman in a green jacket met me at the gate. You must be Ryan, she said before I even spoke. Mark radioed ahead. Let's get them inside. We carried the crate into a dimly lit exam room. The smell of antiseptic mixed with wet fur. Dr. Collins, a calm, no-nonsense woman, began working fast. The cub whimpered when she cleaned its face. The mother growled softly but didn't move. She's dehydrated, Collins murmured. Both of them are. You did the right thing bringing them here. Mark showed up an hour later, soaked and irritated. He looked at me, arms crossed. You know you were supposed to call before jumping in, right? You could have drowned in that muck. I met his glare. If I'd waited for approval, they'd both be dead. He shook his head, but didn't argue. Collins finished bandaging the mother's paw and stepped back. They'll recover, she said. We'll keep them here for a couple of weeks, maybe more. Then we'll relocate them deeper into the preserve, far from the farms. Chances are you'll never see them again. I nodded, but something in her words left me uneasy. As we left the center, the mother lynx raised her head, those same blue eyes locking onto mine through the wire crate. The look wasn't fear or anger, it was something else, like a sentence left unfinished. A week passed before the woods felt quiet again. The storms moved south, the trails dried, and life slid back into its usual rhythm. I still called the rehab center every couple of days. Dr. Collins always sounded calm, efficient. The mother and cub were healing well, she said. The cub was eating, the mother protective but calmer. Each update brought relief, and a strange emptiness I couldn't explain. Nights were colder that week. The trees shed their last leaves, the air smelled of frost. I spent my evenings fixing gear in the shed, Buddy curled near the stove, snoring. He was an old shepherd mix, loyal to a fault. Sometimes he'd lift his head, ears pricking toward the woods, then relax again. I thought nothing of it. One Friday night, I stopped by Rusty's bar, a place where half the county gathered to drink and trade gossip. The talk that night wasn't light. A few farmers sat near the counter, loud and angry. Hank, who owned the ranch near the North Ridge, slammed his beer down hard enough to splash foam. "Something tore up one of my calves last night," he growled. "If it's another cat, I swear I'll start setting traps myself." Someone else chimed in. They'd seen big paw prints by the creek. A hunter swore it was a cougar, another said coyotes. The bartender shrugged, but the air in the room turned sour. Hank's voice cut through the noise again. "We start letting predators wander too close, and we'll regret it. That's how it starts." I didn't say anything, just nursed my drink, staring at the condensation ring it left on the counter. The lynx and her cub were still in rehab. I knew that for a fact. But the way the crowd talked, I felt like I'd brought trouble back with me from that swamp. I left before midnight, the cold air biting sharper than I remembered. The following evening, Buddy started barking around 10. Not his usual half-hearted woof. This was deep, urgent, the kind that rattled through the house. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The yard was quiet, except for the rustle of dry grass. Then I saw it, a shape at the edge of the light. Tall ears, low stance, motionless. My stomach flipped. The lynx stood about 30 feet away, framed by the silver glow of the porch light. Even through the distance, I knew it was her. The pattern of her fur, the small scar near the eye. She wasn't stalking, wasn't running. Just standing, watching. Buddy growled low beside me, but didn't advance. I whispered his name, and he quieted, though every muscle stayed tense. For a full minute, we just looked at each other. The wind stirred, carrying the smell of pine and damp earth. She blinked once, then slowly turned and padded toward the dark tree line. I stood there long after she vanished, my breath fogging in the cold. The next night, it happened again. Same hour. Buddy barked. I opened the door, and there she was, closer this time, moving back and forth, restless. She'd disappear behind the shed, then reappear near the truck, never coming within 20 feet. Each time I stepped forward, she froze and retreated a few paces. Her movements weren't random. They felt deliberate, like she was waiting for me to notice something I couldn't yet see. By the third night, I was half expecting it. The woods were silent when I stepped outside, flashlight in hand. But the beam caught her almost instantly. Eyes gleaming pale blue, fixed on me. She didn't move away this time. Instead, she made that same low, rumbling sound I remembered from the swamp, then turned toward the forest. 2 steps, pause. Another glance over her shoulder. My chest tightened. I knew this pattern. I hesitated at the doorway, trying to reason with myself. Maybe she was just wandering. Maybe it wasn't even the same cat. But deep down, I knew better. The look in her eyes wasn't wild confusion. It was intent, the same intent that had led me to her cub that day. I grabbed my jacket and the heavy flashlight from the table. Buddy whined when I clipped on my radio. "Stay, boy. I'll be back." I called Mark as I headed down the porch steps, keeping my voice low. "There's something strange out here," I said. "The lynx, she's back, and she wants me to follow." There was static, then his tired voice. "Ryan, it's almost midnight. Don't do anything stupid. Just stay put till morning." But the line cut before I could answer. The forest swallowed the signal. Ahead, the lynx waited at the tree line, her eyes glinting once more before she turned and slipped into the dark. I took a breath, tightened my grip on the flashlight, and stepped after her into the night. The forest swallowed the last of the yard light after only a dozen steps. Ahead of me, the lynx moved like a shadow between the trunks, there for a heartbeat and then gone. My flashlight beam bobbed over roots and low branches, catching brief flashes of her pale fur. She was faster than I wanted her to be. Every time I thought I had lost her, she would stop, glance back, and wait just long enough for me to catch up. Then she pushed on again, weaving around fallen logs, crossing patches of dead leaves that crackled under my boots. The air grew colder as we climbed. The trail she chose was not one of the marked ones. This was an old game path, barely visible, cutting across the slope. I knew the general area, knew there were ravines and dry creek beds not far ahead. Part of me kept repeating that I was being stupid. Following a wild cat into the woods at night was not in any safety manual. Still, I kept going. We walked like that for what felt like a long time, though it was probably only 20 minutes. My breath puffed white in the beam of the flashlight. Somewhere in the distance an owl called, then silence fell again. The lynx's tail flicked in short, impatient movements. She seemed more agitated the farther we went. Then the ground suddenly dropped away. I stopped just in time, toes at the edge of a steep slope. The trees opened to reveal a dark gash in the earth, a narrow ravine, maybe 15 or 20 feet deep, lined with rock and loose soil. The lynx stood on the rim a few yards to my right, staring down into the darkness. Her ears were pricked forward, her whole body tight. I killed the flashlight and listened. For a few seconds, there was only the soft rustle of leaves. Then I heard it, thin and ragged under the wind, a human voice. It came as a broken sound, more like a sob than a word. My skin crawled. "Hey," I shouted, my voice echoing along the rock. "Can you hear me? Where are you?" A faint glow flickered below, like a dying firefly. A phone screen, weak and bluish, moved just enough to show me the outline of someone wedged between two boulders near the bottom. A small figure, curled on one side. I switched the flashlight back on and swept the beam down. A girl stared up at me, blinking against the light. Her hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat and dirt, one leg twisted at an angle that made my stomach knot. She whispered something I could not catch. "My name is Ryan," I called down. "I am with the park volunteers. You are not alone, okay? What is your name?" "Lauren," she rasped. Her voice shook. I fell. "I know," I said. "Just stay still for a moment." The slope was too steep to just scramble down. Loose stones skittered away under my boots as I tested the edge. One wrong step, and I would join her at the bottom, maybe worse off than she was. I took a breath and forced myself to think. The lynx paced along the rim, back and forth, tail slashing. Every few seconds she looked at me, then down at the girl, then back again. It was as if she was afraid I would turn around and leave. I pulled the small first aid kit and the emergency line from my jacket pocket. It was not much, but it was something. I anchored the line around a tree and eased myself over the edge, moving sideways, digging my heels into the dirt. Pebbles rattled past my feet. Halfway down, the soil crumbled and I slipped, swinging on the rope. My shoulder slammed into rock, but I held on. "Easy," Lauren called weakly. Her phone screen dimmed again. I reached the bottom on my knees, breath burning in my lungs. Up close, she looked younger than I had thought, maybe 16 or 17. Her left leg was twisted beneath her, the ankle swollen, and there was blood matted in her hair at the temple. "You picked a bad place for a nap," I said, trying to keep my tone light. She huffed something like a laugh, then winced. "I got separated from my group," she said. "I thought I could cut across the ridge. Then the ground was just not there anymore." I checked her pulse, her breathing, the way her pupils reacted to the flashlight. Training from countless ranger briefings clicked into place. Possible concussion, broken leg, mild hypothermia setting in. Leaving her alone to go for help was not an option. I helped her adjust to a better position, sliding my jacket under her shoulders. My own hands were going numb from the cold. I pulled the emergency blanket from the kit and wrapped it around her. The metallic crinkle echoed oddly in the ravine. "Do you have any battery left on that phone?" I asked. "A little," she said. "I was saving it in case anyone called." "Good. I need mine more." I dialed the local search and rescue number, hoping for a signal. The first attempt dropped. I moved a few feet, arms stretched high, and tried again. This time the call went through, barely. I spoke slowly, giving landmarks, describing the trail, the ravine, the approximate distance from the road. The operator repeated everything twice, her voice fading in and out. "Stay with her," she said finally. "Do not move her more than you have to. We are coming." When the call ended, the silence felt heavier. Above us, the lynx laid down at the rim, only her head visible against the sky. Her ears turned with every sound, like a sentry. "Who is up there?" Lauren whispered. "I keep hearing something." "You are going to think I am crazy," I said, settling beside her. "But that is a lynx. She is the reason I found you." Lauren stared at me, eyes wide. "A lynx?" "Yeah," I answered. "Long story. I will tell you the rest when it is not freezing." She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I heard something moving before I fell. I thought it was just my imagination. Maybe she was trying to warn me." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe she just does not like humans crashing in her backyard." We both tried to laugh, but the sound came out thin. Time stretched. I checked her leg again, making sure the blanket covered her feet, rubbing her hands when they trembled. I asked simple questions to keep her talking. Where she was from, who she had been hiking with, what she wanted to do when she finished school. She answered in short bursts, voice fading whenever a wave of pain hit. Every so often I glanced up. The lynx was still there, unmoving except for the occasional flick of her tail. Once, she crept a little lower down the slope, then stopped when our eyes met, as if asking for permission to stay. Dawn was just beginning to gray the sky when I finally heard the distant whine of engines. Lauren's eyes filled with tears of relief. I shouted until my throat burned, waving the flashlight like a beacon. 2 rescue workers appeared on the rim above us, helmets catching the first weak light. "We see you," one of them called. "Hold on." They anchored ropes and descended with practiced efficiency. Within minutes they had Lauren's leg immobilized, an oxygen mask over her face, warm packs against her sides. As they prepared to haul her up, one of the rescuers, a stocky man with tired eyes, looked at me curiously. "How did you even know she was down here?" he asked. No one had our number yet. I hesitated, glancing toward the top of the ravine. The lynx stood there, outlined against the brightening sky, watching in absolute stillness. I knew how it would sound. I also knew it was the truth. "I followed a lynx," I said quietly. "She led me straight here." The man snorted, half amused, half skeptical. "Well, remind me to send that cat a thank you card." Above us, the lynx flicked her ears once, then turned away from the edge, melting back into the trees while Lauren was lifted toward the waiting stretchers. 3 weeks passed before the hills dried enough for spring to settle in. The last patches of snow melted into the creeks, and the forest, stripped bare for months, began to breathe again. My phone buzzed one morning, a message from Dr. Collins. "The girl you helped is awake and recovering. She asked about you." A few days later, I drove to the county hospital. The air smelled of antiseptic and coffee, and the walls hummed with quiet machinery. Lauren looked smaller in the bed than she had in the ravine, but her face had color again. Her parents were there too, tired, grateful people who had run out of words to say thank you. I told them it was luck, but they shook their heads. When they stepped out for a moment, she smiled faintly. "You didn't tell anyone about the lynx, did you?" "No," I said. "I figured no one would believe it anyway." "Good," she whispered. "Let it stay ours. People talk too much when they don't understand." There was a calmness in her voice that surprised me. She'd seen fear up close. Maybe that's what it takes to sound that sure. We talked for a while, about the woods, about the smell of rain, about how she swore she could still hear that rumbling sound from the ridge when she closed her eyes. When I left, she pressed a note into my hand. It only said, she knew. 2 days later, a short piece ran on the local news. Volunteer rescues lost teen from ravine. No mention of the animal, just a few seconds of footage of me looking awkward in front of a camera. They asked how I found her, and I said I followed a trail I didn't recognize until I heard her voice. It wasn't a lie, just not the full truth. Mark came by that evening. He leaned on the truck, sipping coffee from a paper cup. "You know, people are still talking about that lynx you claim led you there. Half of the rangers think you imagined it. The other half are just jealous. What about you?" I asked. He smirked. "I think you're crazy, but crazy's not always wrong." A week later, Hank called me. The same farmer who'd wanted to trap every predator in the county. His tone was different this time. "Ryan, can you stop by the ranch tonight?" he asked. "There's something I think you should see." I drove out just before dusk. The fields shimmered with fog, and the cows huddled near the fence line. Hank met me by the barn, flashlight in hand. He pointed toward the far pasture. Out there, by the creek, was a shape. Low, graceful, silent. A lynx, unmistakable even from this distance. She wasn't stalking. She moved along the edge of the field, head low, careful. Her path curved wide around the herd, never closer than 50 yards. I stood beside Hank without a word. He finally muttered. I almost grabbed the rifle. Then she stopped and looked right at me. And I don't know, it felt wrong. Like she wasn't here for that. He scratched his beard. "I'm not saying I believe your story, but I didn't shoot. Thought you'd want to know." I drove home with the window down, listening to the wind. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting to be finished. So the next morning, I packed a thermos and walked the old service road back toward the swamp. The path was familiar now, the same one I'd taken that first day, but everything felt lighter. The mud was dry, the air bright. Birds flicked between branches. When I reached the clearing, I stopped. The ground still bore faint tracks, long since hardened. At first there was nothing but wind. Then, from the far side of the marsh, movement, two shapes emerging through the reeds. The mother lynx, lean and strong again, and beside her a smaller one, nearly grown. They paused when they saw me. For a heartbeat, the forest went still. She didn't growl, didn't move. Just stood there, eyes locked on mine. I didn't raise my hand or take a step closer. There was nothing to say, nothing to ask for. She turned slightly, nudged the young one, and together they vanished into the trees as quietly as they had come. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence. The swamp looked harmless now, just another patch of wilderness. But I remembered that first day, her eyes above the mud, the way I'd called it a plea for help. Maybe it hadn't been. Maybe it was just life, raw and desperate, refusing to give up. She hadn't begged. She'd fought. And somehow, in saving her, I'd been pulled into that same fight. Twice she'd led me to where death was waiting. Once for her cub, once for that girl. And both times, we'd made it out. We like to think wild animals live in some other world, one that doesn't touch ours. But they see us. They remember. And sometimes, for reasons we'll never fully understand, they trust us enough to let us help. I took one last look at the empty clearing before turning back toward the road. Some debts can't be repaid, and maybe they're not meant to be. Sometimes all you can do is meet a pair of frightened eyes and answer with your own, even if it's just for a few seconds on the edge of a swamp.